And here to shed some light on this is Jon Cassidy from watchdog.org. Jon, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Jon, you claim Wallace Hall, a regent appointed to the position by Texas Governor Rick Perry, is facing impeachment and possible jail time for asking questions and investigating things such as loans and admissions, favoritism rather. Give us some more details on this story.
Sure. Well, this started out a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago. There was a bit of a scandal at the University of Texas Law School where it turned out the dean and a number of professors had this sort of were getting money from, you might call it a bit of a slush fund. It was an off-the-books pay scandal. The dean had a $500,000 forgivable loan, they call it. That's where you get a loan, but you just don't have to pay it back. And nobody at the university had authorized this. So he had to step down as dean at that point. And so the Board of Regents was very concerned about this. They began looking into it. And one regent in particular came across just a bunch of very kind of troubling, concerning information. So as he began pressing more and more for answers, he got quite a bit of resistance, both from the university, where the president's quite popular. It's particularly popular in the Capitol. And then it seemed like half the legislature started coming down on him. The regent's name is Wallace Hall, and suddenly, you know, from the halls of the Capitol, there's all this hue and cry that, you know, how dare this guy micromanage the president, and he's on some sort of witch hunt to oust him. And in short order, they started to they launched impeachment proceedings against him. That was last summer. And then over this past winter, they've had a series of hearings where they've just brought in witnesses for one side. They haven't allowed him to cross-examine anybody. He wasn't able to tell his side of the story. And the purpose, you know, I don't know if they're actually going to try to go through an impeachment or not. The way things are changing, I sort of doubt that they'll continue with this farce for too much longer. But the idea was to try to bully him, to get him to back down, and he's just refused to do that. He's continued to press for information. And kind of the most troubling thing that he's found, and this is something I've been able to develop more in my own reporting, is just there's just a mountain of evidence that explaining why this is all going on. This is basically that the president of the university has been doing favors for the lawmakers, allowing in candidates they asked, their own kids, kids of big donors, letting them in as undergrads, and especially to UT Law School. It's a much bigger deal. I mean, you've got, you know, quite a few spots in the undergrad program, but UT Law is a very prestigious program. If you get in there, you've got your career kind of set, and they're obviously, you know, highly competitive spots. So I've actually, you know, been able to unearth just their LSAT scores coming in, their record on the bar exam, and I mean, we're talking LSAT scores so bad, you know, you could get these scores by just filling out bubbles at random on the test, and they're still getting into this school.
Well, you mentioned what is going on there, and there is a political equation to this, Jon, and the situation involving Governor Rick Perry, who has stood up to applaud and defend Wallace Hall. Here's what Governor Perry had to say, quote, "Wallace Hall should be commended for his persistence in the face of overwhelming opposition from bureaucrats in trying to ensure the institutions of higher education under his purview are operating effectively, efficiently, and within the law." Now, Jon, we hear jokes. My old Texas friends with whom I served in Congress would talk about the People's Republic of Austin, and they're around the state capitol, and the very, well, I don't know if you call it liberal or leftist nature of what goes on the UT campus. Is this another example of, I guess, what some might call liberal fascism, depriving Wallace Hall of due process?
There's no question about it. This is just a bigotry in the most classic sense. You know, these days we tend to confuse that word with prejudice. But bigotry is just intolerance of people with a different opinion. And they simply don't tolerate him because he has some ideas about, you know, how the university should modernize itself. Should it adopt more online learning? Should professors be accountable for, you know, how many students they teach? And that's a big threat to the status quo there. So just any possibility that he might get anywhere with this is a huge threat to a number of vested interests, and they'll, you know, stoop to some pretty low levels to try to take out their opponent.
Jon, we're going to switch gears now to another whistleblower case, the VA scandal that's been all over the news. Can you talk about that case and the importance of whistleblowers coming forward there?
Well, I mean, it shows just how hard it is for whistleblowing to be functional, especially when it's just done in-house. You know, we all like the idea of a chain of command, of just telling of dealing with it in-house. But he's reported all these complaints already within the VA, and the VA supposedly investigated them and came back with oh, well, everything's just fine. And it's just now coming out, of course, that system-wide they've had this problem with manipulating waiting times, with basically just inventing numbers in order to be able to get bonuses. So I think the lesson there is that a lot of times, unless this stuff comes all the way out to the public, you just can't trust that a government agency can police itself that well.
And John, we're getting reports today. I don't know if you've seen these, but we talked about them earlier on this program with retired Major General Paul Vallely. Reports that members of the platoon in which Bo Bergdahl was serving were asked to sign non-disclosure forms about their time in the military. General Vallely said that's unheard of, and obviously believes that came down the chain of command. Are we going to need whistleblowers within our armed forces, and what does that do to the chain of command?
The impressive thing for me is the number of folks that either refused to sign those non-disclosure agreements or have come forward anyways. I mean, it took no time at all, because those men have some moral integrity, a sense of right and wrong. And if your friend was the one who got shot down or got killed by an IED in the search for this guy, I think you're going to put a lot more importance on his life than on some piece of paper. So, I mean, the idea that they would try to coerce any soldiers into refusing to tell the truth about what happened there is abhorrent. But I think those guys are heroes for coming forward and just telling the truth about what they know.
Jon Cassidy of Watchdog.org, we thank you for taking us literally from Austin to Afghanistan.
Just like that.
Talking about the importance of whistleblowers, and we appreciate the good work you do at Watchdog.org. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So we heard from John there, the importance of whistleblowers. Obviously, one of the reasons we're here, we're not the media, we're Newsmax. We focus on these things, and we want your comments on the value of whistleblowers in our free society. Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum. There's also email, connect@email.com. And don't forget Facebook, facebook.com/Newsmax.